David and Alicia James had always dreamed of something bigger than the sun-drenched beaches of Montego Bay. They wanted history, adventure, and something that would set their 5th anniversary apart from any other memory. Ethiopia, with its ancient churches carved from stone and landscapes that fell somewhere between heaven and earth, seemed like the perfect answer. Their friends thought it was a curious choice. Most expected them to pick Paris, Rome, or maybe a tropical cruise through the Caribbean. But David, a photographer with a love for culture, wanted to capture something raw and timeless. Alicia, who worked as an elementary school teacher, was drawn by Ethiopia's deep historical roots, the birthplace of humanity, the legend of the Queen of Sheba, the echoes of emperors past. For them, it wasn't just a trip. It was a pilgrimage of love and discovery. For weeks they planned carefully. They saved money, double-checked their passports, and even practiced a few basic Amharic phrases. On the night before their departure, Alicia wrote in her journal, "We'll be walking through the same streets as kings and warriors once did, holding hands like we always have. This will be the greatest chapter of our love story." When their flight lifted into the Jamaican night sky, city lights fading beneath them, the couple leaned against each other in quiet anticipation. Neither of them could imagine that this journey, so hoped for, so carefully woven into their dreams, would not carry them home again. The wheels of the plane touched down on the runway at Addis Ababa Bole International Airport, and a wave of excitement swept over David and Alicia. After nearly 15 hours in the air, they were finally here, the land they had spoken about for months. As they stepped off the plane, the air felt thinner but alive, infused with spice, roasted beans, and a crisp mountain breeze that reminded David of early mornings in the Jamaican countryside. Taxi horns, street vendors, and the chatter of locals filled the atmosphere as they drove into the capital. Addis was alive with contrasts. Modern glass towers rising above old churches, crowded markets pressed against neat cafes, colors bursting from stalls of woven scarves and clay coffee pots. Their first stop was the National Museum of Ethiopia, where Alicia gasped at the sight of Lucy, the 3.2-million-year-old fossil that stood as proof of humanity's ancient beginnings. "We're standing where it all began," she whispered to David, who captured the moment on his camera. Later, they wandered through the bustling Piazza district, sharing fresh roasted coffee and watching the rhythmic swirl of Ethiopian dancers in a small cultural cafe. Each moment deepened their sense of wonder and convinced them they had made the right choice for their anniversary. That evening in their hotel, Alicia leaned against the balcony, eyes set on the glowing city lights. "This feels like destiny," she said softly. David smiled, sliding his arm around her shoulders. He had no way of knowing that destiny would soon twist, leading them far from the bright lights of Addis into shadows darker than they could imagine. The morning sun painted the skies of Addis in gold as David and Alicia prepared for another day of exploring. Their itinerary included a guided trip to the famous rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, but before their tour even began, fate seemed to throw a variable into their story. Outside a busy cafe near their hotel, they were approached by a tall, soft-spoken Ethiopian man who introduced himself as Tesfaye. His grin was warm, his English impeccable, and he carried himself with the easy charm of someone used to talking to foreigners. "You don't want the tourist maps," he said with a laugh, noticing the folded pamphlet in David's hand. "They only show you the places everyone goes. But Ethiopia is much deeper than that. There are places no one writes about, mountains, hidden monasteries, real Ethiopia. If you have time, I can show you." David instinctively stiffened. As a traveler and photographer, he'd met many people abroad, some genuinely kind, others looking for quick cash. He glanced at Alicia, silently asking if they should politely walk away. But Alicia's eyes lit up. She had always been more trusting, more open. She saw Tesfaye's eagerness not as a threat but as an opportunity. "We want to see the real Ethiopia," she told him. "Not just what every guidebook says." Tesfaye smiled wider, sensing her trust. "Exactly. I know a trail in the highlands near Lalibela. Few tourists go there. Beautiful view, very safe. You will never forget it." David hesitated. Do you do this often? With tourists? Tesfaye's response was smooth, almost rehearsed. Yes, of course. I have guided many. I want visitors to love my country, not just the postcard version. He then mentioned a modest fee, far cheaper than official guides, which made Alicia more eager. Later, at the hotel, the couple debated it. David worried aloud. We don't even know him. What if? Alicia cut him off gently. Babe, look around us. Everyone's been so welcoming. He seems kind. Besides, it's not like we'll be alone in the wilderness. It's a guided trail, right? She smiled and reached for his hand. It'll be an adventure. Just you and me. Reluctantly, David relented. He didn't want to dampen her joy. He told himself his instincts were just the usual nerves of being abroad. Maybe Tesfaye really was just a proud local, wanting to share his culture. That night, David sent a message to a close friend. Met a guy who says he can take us off the tourist path. Don't know if I trust him, but Alicia loves the idea. Guess we'll see. To him, it was just a casual note, something soon forgotten amidst their excitement. To everyone who later read it, however, it felt like a chilling prelude. An omen written in plain sight, hours before their story began to shift from romance to tragedy. The next morning, before dawn fully lit the horizon, David and Alicia met Tesfaye outside their hotel. He carried a worn satchel slung over his shoulder and walked with the easy confidence of a man who knew the land well. The couple followed him into a waiting minivan that carried them north toward Lalibela. The city soon gave way to rolling fields and jagged mountains. David gazed out the window, his camera already in hand. Terraced farms stretched across hillsides like green steps to the sky, and shepherds led flocks along dusty trails. Alicia leaned on his shoulder, whispering, "It feels like we're entering a painting." By the time they reached the highlands, the landscape had shifted from bustling roads to lonely, winding paths. Tesfaye led them on foot toward trails that snaked into the cliffs. The higher they climbed, the crisper the air became. Sunlight poured over the valleys, revealing ancient stone ruins half swallowed by earth. At first, it was everything Alicia had hoped for. Untouched beauty, stories told in crumbling walls, the sound of wind whistling through the mountains like a hymn. Yet David couldn't shake an unease. Tesfaye walked slightly ahead of them, his conversation flowing easily, but his questions grew strangely pointed. How long will you two stay in Ethiopia? Your hotel in Addis? Is it expensive? You must have brought good money to travel so far. David responded carefully, keeping his answers vague. But Alicia, ever gracious, offered polite smiles and softer details. To her, he was just curious, proud of his country and curious about theirs. But to David, each question felt heavier, like a stone added to the pit in his stomach. Later, when they rested under a shaded tree, David whispered to her, "Something's off. Don't you feel it?" Alicia frowned. "He's just being friendly. You overthink everything." Still, David's instincts flickered like a warning light he couldn't turn off. From where he sat, he noticed Tesfaye watching them from a distance, quiet, his eyes tracking not just their faces, but the bags they carried. As the sun began to sink low, washing the mountains in red gold light, Tesfaye smiled his easy smile again. "Tomorrow," he said, "we go deeper into the trails, to a place very few outsiders see. It is hidden, almost secret." Alicia's eyes lit up with excitement. David forced himself to smile, though his chest felt tight. He wanted to believe this was still just the trip of their dreams. But in his mind, a thought he could not silence lingered. What if we never make it back? On their third evening in Ethiopia, David sent what would be his final message home. Sitting under the flickering glow of a kerosene lamp in a small village guest house, he typed quickly on his phone. "We're heading for one last adventure tomorrow with our new guide. Then back to the city." Back in Jamaica, his mother read the text with a smile, imagining her son smiling beside Alicia in some picturesque mountain village. She replied, "Be safe, my son. Call me tomorrow when you reach back." But the message would never be seen. The next day came and went, and no call arrived. Hotel staff in Addis Ababa grew uneasy when the couple did not return as expected. Their luggage remained untouched, their room empty since morning. Calls to their phones went unanswered. At first, officials suspected a delay. Travel in Ethiopia's rural regions was unpredictable. Buses broke down, and mountain roads often washed out during the rainy season. But as hours turned into a full day, silence stretched into dread. By the second night, worry spread across 2 continents. In Kingston, Alicia's brother became frantic after repeated attempts to reach her failed. David's best friend, the one who had received his earlier text about Tesfaye, checked again, rereading the words with new anxiety. With our new guide, it no longer sounded like a casual detail. It read like a warning carved in hindsight. Local police were notified. They questioned drivers in the city and villagers in the highlands. Flyers bearing the faces of the smiling Jamaican couple began to circulate through Addis Ababa's crowded markets, offering rewards for information. The Jamaican embassy pressed for urgency, while local newspapers picked up the story. Tourists missing in northern Ethiopia. Rumors began to stir. Some whispered they had been kidnapped by bandits. Others said they had fallen into a ravine while hiking. Quietly, police considered a more chilling possibility, that they had been robbed and murdered. For now, there was only silence. Their phones dead, their laughter gone. All that remained was a void in the mountains, waiting to reveal its terrible truth. The search started quietly, almost cautiously, as if people hoped the couple would simply reappear with wide smiles, laughing at the fuss they had caused. But by the third day, when no word came, search efforts expanded. Police officers from the Lalibela district fanned out along the mountain trails, accompanied by local volunteers and shepherds who knew the terrain better than anyone. Every path, every ravine, every clearing was scoured. Flyers bearing David and Alicia's faces fluttered on walls and market stalls. 2 strangers now etched into the daily rhythm of Ethiopian life. In Kingston, the story hit the news. The headlines ran, "Jamaican couple missing in Ethiopia." Vigils began outside their church, candles lit as neighbors prayed for their safe return. On social media, friends flooded timelines with their photographs. David holding his camera, Alicia wearing her broad, disarming smile. Meanwhile, in Addis Ababa, murmurs spread through crowded cafes and busy streets. Some locals insisted the couple must have wandered too far into the cliffs and gotten lost. Others said it was bandits, small groups who preyed on unsuspecting travelers outside the main tourist sites. More hushed voices whispered about Tesfaye, the guide who had last been seen with them. Investigators began tracing their steps backward. Witnesses confirmed seeing the couple leave Lalibela with him. Some villagers said they watched the 3 pass together into a less frequented trail. That was the last anyone recalled. Inside a cramped police office, the chief inspector tapped the couple's projected photo on the wall. "They did not vanish into thin air," he said grimly. "Someone took them, or someone silenced them." By the 5th day, tension thickened into dread. Searchers combing a remote forest patch stumbled upon a woman's handbag shredded apart, its contents scattered, half buried beneath leaves and mud. Among the scraps was a passport cover, streaked with earth, edges torn. It was Alicia's. The forest was silent when the shepherd boy stumbled upon the first clue. He had been following his goats along a narrow ravine trail when his eyes caught the edge of a handbag, half buried in mud, its strap torn clean off. At first, he thought it was just trash, until he saw the glint of a Jamaican passport cover sticking out of the soil. Alarmed, he ran down to the nearby village and led local police back to the site. What followed would unravel the horrifying truth of David and Alicia's fate. The search teams expanded the perimeter. With sticks and gloved hands, they combed the undergrowth. Just a short distance beyond the bag, under a tree with roots twisting into the ground like claws, they found scattered clothing, David's shirt, bloodied and slashed. A trail of dark stains led deeper, into denser growth. Shovels were brought in. Soon, the earth gave way, the smell of fresh soil mingling with something sour, heavier. When the first grave was uncovered, officers recoiled. There lay David, face turned toward the dirt, his body bearing multiple stab wounds across the chest and abdomen. His camera strap was still hanging from his shoulder, though the camera itself was missing. Alicia's body was discovered just a few steps away in a second shallow grave, hurriedly covered with loose earth and rocks. She had defensive wounds across her arms, evidence she had fought desperately in her final moments. The engagement ring still clung to her finger, caked in earth. Word spread quickly. By the time night fell, the discovery had already reached news desks in both Ethiopia and Jamaica. The headlines were devastating. Missing Jamaican couple found dead in Ethiopia highlands. David's mother, who had been clinging to hope, collapsed upon hearing the news. Alicia's brother, furious with grief, lashed out on national television. They trusted someone who offered them friendship, and he gave them death. This can't go unanswered. At the crime scene, investigators took careful stock. Personal belongings were scattered. A blood-stained jacket, shoes, and bags torn open. Missing were their cash, phones, and jewelry. To the officers, the motive was clear: robbery that escalated into violence. But what sealed their suspicion was a discovery made in a nearby hut during one of the raids. A hut that belonged to Tesfaye. Hidden under his bedding, police uncovered the couple's passports, part of their money, and Alicia's necklace. What had once seemed like a friendly guide was now the prime suspect in a double murder that shocked two nations. The discovery of the shallow graves left little doubt, but investigators needed a face to attach to the horror. That face was Tesfaye. Witnesses came forward quickly. Locals recalled seeing him moving through Lalibela with the Jamaican couple in the days before their disappearance. A shopkeeper swore he saw the three laughing together as Tesfaye bought bottled water and snacks for the journey. A shepherd testified that he had passed them on a mountain path, noting the foreign couple's bright clothing and Tesfaye walking a few paces ahead, confident, as if he owned the land beneath his feet. At first, police moved quietly. They raided Tesfaye's hut on the outskirts of a small mountain village. Inside, the evidence was damning. They found the couple's passports folded carefully inside a sack of grain. A necklace that David had bought for Alicia at a Jamaican market gleamed faintly under the lantern light. Wads of foreign currency were tucked into an old jacket pocket. And perhaps most gut-wrenching of all, their phones, switched off, screens cracked, one still smeared faintly with blood. When neighbors were questioned, they spoke hesitantly. Tesfaye, they said, was a man known for his charm. He lingered near bus stations, cafes, and hotels, seeking out tourists. Some villagers whispered they had long distrusted him. His friendliness always felt calculated. But no one had ever imagined he was capable of something this brutal. By the time the police closed in on him, Tesfaye had vanished. For weeks, reports trickled in. Sightings of a man trekking through the highlands, hiding in abandoned huts, traveling by night. Authorities believed he was being sheltered by distant relatives or sympathetic villagers who saw him as a desperate man fleeing rather than a cold-blooded killer. The manhunt stretched across valleys, monasteries, and winding mountain trails. Armed officers scoured caves and ravines by day while patrols tightened checkpoints on mountain passes by night. Ethiopia's rugged landscape, beautiful and merciless, became a labyrinth where Tesfaye played a deadly game of hide and seek. International pressure mounted. Jamaican diplomats demanded justice for David and Alicia. Ethiopia's government publicly vowed swift action, promising the couple's families that Tesfaye would be found. Finally, nearly 2 weeks later, the crack in Tesfaye's escape plan emerged. He was spotted by villagers in a remote settlement near the Simeon Mountains, attempting to barter stolen jewelry for food. The villagers, now wary of his face plastered on wanted posters, alerted authorities. By dusk, heavily armed officers surrounded the area. Cornered in a crumbling stone hut, Tesfaye tried to flee through the back door, sprinting into the brush. But he didn't make it far. An officer tackled him swiftly, forcing him into the earth. His wrists were bound, his body dragged out into the torchlight. The photographs that circulated the next morning showed him being led through the village. His once confident smile replaced by a grim, vacant stare. The evidence against him was undeniable, but many wanted to hear his own words. Why he'd betrayed tourists who had trusted him. Why 2 innocent lives had to end in such bloodshed? That answer would come soon enough. Chilling, simple, and devastating. Tesfaye sat in the interrogation room, shackled to a wooden chair, staring at the floor. For 2 days he refused to speak, his silence filling the small chamber with tension. But when investigators set the couple's passports and Alicia's necklace on the table before him, something in his composure cracked. His eyes flickered, his jaw tightened, and words finally spilled out. "I just wanted the money," he muttered in Amharic, the translator's voice flat as it relayed the confession to the Jamaican officials present. "They had more than I'll ever see in a lifetime. I thought I could take it and they would leave. That was all. But it hadn't gone that way." In his own words, Tesfaye explained the grim details. He lured David and Alicia farther into the highlands, far from populated routes. When he tried to take their belongings, David resisted, shielding Alicia. The struggle escalated quickly. A knife came out. Whether it was prepared all along or brought out of panic, Tesfaye never clarified. Within minutes, the couple lay bleeding on the mountainside. Tesfaye buried them in shallow graves, thinking the forest and silence would swallow their story. When prosecutors presented the case in court, the evidence was damning. The couple's property found in his possession, the witness testimonies, and his own admission painted a picture of premeditated betrayal. Ethiopia's courtroom was packed each day. Locals, journalists, embassy officials, everyone watching, waiting for justice. David's family flew in from Jamaica to attend the trial. His mother, once strong and composed, broke down when photographs of the graves were shown. Alicia's brother sat rigid with anger, glaring at Tesfaye as if willing him to look back, though he never did. The prosecutors painted him as a predator, a man who scouted vulnerable foreigners for personal gain. The defense attempted to argue desperation, that Tesfaye was poor, a product of circumstances, and that it was never supposed to go as far as murder. But the brutality of the evidence was overwhelming. When the verdict was read, silence gripped the room. Guilty on all charges: robbery, double homicide, and concealment of bodies. The court moved swiftly, sentencing Tesfaye to life imprisonment with hard labor, effectively ending his days as a free man. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones were thrust toward David's mother as she left the building. Through tears, she said only, "No justice will bring my son and Alicia back, but at least he will never walk these mountains free again." For Ethiopia, the trial was a stain on its tourism image. For Jamaica, it was a wound that would never fully heal. 2 young lives, filled with dreams of discovery and love, were cut down in a foreign land by a man they trusted. And yet, even in that courtroom, it was not Tesfaye's face nor his verdict that lingered most in memory. It was the smiling photographs of David and Alicia, relics of a love story that began as a celebration and ended as a tragedy buried in the highlands.